One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. We've got a great show with a very good friend of mine today, Bryan Caplin, the new Chief Revenue Officer of Andela. He spent the last 19 years at just two companies, Corporate Executive Board and Axiom. And he left Axiom recently as the general manager and head of North American sales and marketing to join Andela as CRO. And so we're going to be talking about that transition of you've worked somewhere, how do you know it's time to leave? And then how do you make the step to a new company and how do you evaluate those companies? And then what do you do in the first 30, 60, 90 days as a new executive to ensure that you hit the ground running and that you do a great job? So it's a great show. Before we get there, we want to thank our sponsors. We've got two sponsors today. The first is Vidyard. Email isn't dead, but it sure is boring. Add video to your emails to stand out in the inbox for free with Vidyard. Vidyard helps you easily record, send, and track who is viewing your video content in 3 simple steps. First, easily record your screen or yourself on camera. Next, share your videos and email with just a few clicks. And finally, see when someone watches your videos. Vidyard will let you know who clicked play and how much they watched. Get Vidyard for free by visiting vidyard.com/saleshacker. That's vidyard.com/saleshacker. We also want to thank Outreach. That's outreach.io, the leading sales engagement platform. Outreach supports sales reps by enabling them to humanize communications at scale, from automating the soul-sucking manual work that eats up selling time to providing action-oriented tips on what communications are working best. Outreach has your back. Now let's listen to this amazing interview with my good friend Bryan Caplin. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. Today I am delighted and excited to have a good friend of mine on the show. Today we've got Bryan Caplin. Bryan is the newly appointed Chief Revenue Officer of a company called Andela. Bryan has a long and storied career as a sales manager, sales leader, and commercial leader, both in the New York tech system and ecosystem, but also abroad in London and also in Washington, D.C. Prior to his appointment as Chief Revenue Officer of Andela, he was the general manager and head of sales for North America at Axiom, which was a storied company that we can talk about a little bit, that I think just went through a transaction. And then prior to that, he spent 10 years at CEB, which is the time that he spent over in London. And also, we've known each other for quite a while. Bryan went to the University of Virginia and has good taste in music and bad taste in sports teams. Would you agree?
I would definitely agree with all of that.
So, well, welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thanks,
we like to start with your baseball card. So you're the new CRO of Andela, correct?
That is correct.
What is, who is, how does Andela?
Yeah. So Andela is what I would call an engineering as a service company. We help technology leaders build distributed software engineering teams quickly and cost effectively so they can hopefully ship product faster. We're based here in New York, been around for about 6 years. We have over 1,000 engineers based on the continent of Africa across 5 different countries and about 200 client-facing individuals here in the U.S.
Wow. And how long have you been there?
I've been here for a whopping 1 month. So drinking from the fire hose, as they say.
They do say that. Okay. And then, well, I guess I'm curious, this can be an interesting episode because you just joined as a CRO, but let's quickly go through the rest of your career and sort of figure out how it was that you became to be a CRO. So you spent 10 years at Corporate Executive Board, and then what happened? Tell us, first of all, if anybody doesn't know, what does Corporate Executive Board do? Because I think that was sort of a formative part of your career, if you agree or disagree.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. So Corporate Executive Board, which then rebranded as CEB and is now part of Gartner, they really came to be known for what was called best practice research. The whole idea behind the Corporate Executive Board was if you're a C-level executive across any function or someone on their team, you're probably struggling with the same challenges that another executive at another company has struggled with. Learn from them, learn from the best practices that they've figured out. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you're the head of sales and you're trying to figure out how to segment your territory more effectively, learn from someone else who's done that. And CEB had teams of researchers that would figure out who was best in class, who had the best practice, and they would then teach those ideas and tools through to their members, across a bunch of different functions. So that's the whole idea behind Corporate Executive Board. It grew phenomenally across the 10 years that I was there, and like I said, most recently was acquired by Gartner about 2 years ago.
Cool. How'd you find your way to Axiom?
So, spent, as you said, around 10 years at CEB, and including the last 2 years in London, which was a ton of fun and probably some of the more formative years in my sales career. Axiom got on my radar because one of my my very first boss in sales, a gentleman by the name of Will McKinnon, went to Axiom Law probably about 2 years before I went there. And way back early in my career, I was a paralegal out of undergrad.
I didn't know that.
I was, thinking I wanted to go to law school.
Is that where you met your wonderful wife?
It is. She went to law school, unfortunately, and then I made the decision not to. But we met, which was great. But I always had some interest in the law. And so when I learned about Axiom Law, which was kind of this, it's an overused term now, but this disruptor in the industry, learned about what they were doing. And at the time, they were really trying to build a true sales force in the legal industry, which was pretty novel. I thought, well, that's an interesting blend of my, background and my interest in the subject matter. So Will got me in front of the leadership of the company at the time. It was pretty small, and I got started over in London in January of 2010.
Wow. And so 10 years and then 9 years, and then you just started at Andela. I guess when you think about, we talk about the average tenure being 17, 18 months for commercial leaders at high growth companies. You've just been at 2 high growth companies, but only 2 over 19 years. What do you attribute that stability to, that longevity, if anything?
Yeah. I can't say that I thought I would be at either organization for 9 and 10 years, right? That is probably too high of a bar, too high of an expectation to set. I can say certainly in picking Axiom, and I think now the same with Andela, I went through a pretty, what I believe was a thoughtful and, really disciplined process in evaluating the organization. I am a loyal guy, as you can see. So I am looking for a place where I know I can grow. Obviously, so much of it is around the people, right? Who am I working for? Who am I working with? Will I be intellectually stimulated? Will I be challenged by them? Will I learn from them? Will I enjoy working with them? All in my career, I've primarily worked at what I would call people-based organizations or professional services organizations versus SaaS or tech. So even more so, I think the onus is on the people you work with to have that experience. So, ensuring that the fit is there from the start was really, really important. I've tended to focus on, earlier stage, high growth companies that have really strong product market fit. And again, you learn that through evaluation, through talking with the board members, talking with, clients or past clients, et cetera. So I can see that there's that runway for growth, and, have chosen companies where I thought personally there would be a lot of growth for me as well. Again, I didn't think it would be a 10-year run, but every year my job changed, the company changed, the challenges changed, and that kept me really stimulated for a long time in both organizations.
One of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a Revenue Collective member. Jessica Hunt is a Revenue Collective member. She's your boss, but she came to Axiom after you. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had moved back from London to New York in 2013 and had been kind of running our New York business for a couple of years. And then we hired Jess from GLG, Gerson Lerman Group, to come in, and she was my boss then.
So how'd you, we talk a lot on the podcast, and I interview lots and lots of people that sometimes they react differently to somebody senior coming in over them, sometimes sort of supplanting the job that they expected to have. But you thrived when this situation happened. Was there anything that you had to tell yourself kind of emotionally or psychologically to adjust to a new boss? What's your approach? Because clearly you followed her to Andela, so it obviously went really, really well. How did you think about, somebody coming over the top from a hierarchy perspective when maybe was a job that you wanted or aspired
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, and look, I'd be lying if my first reaction wasn't, why not me? Why am I not ready for this opportunity? And I think if you're a high performing, ambitious person, that's probably your first reaction. At the same time, at least with Jess, I quickly saw that here is an opportunity to learn from someone who had a pretty different skill set than I had, especially from a leadership perspective, from a change management perspective, from an operations perspective. And, I went into that relationship saying, okay, I'm going to give this a few months to see how this is going to work, to ensure, to see if there's not only this is a fit, but to, see what I can learn from this individual. I knew that I could certainly, I think at least I thought I could also teach Jess some things about Axiom and about our business. And, very quickly it clicked. And, we spent the better part of 4 or 5 years together, building a really great business at Axiom, which, continues to thrive today. And yeah, when Jess went to Andela, obviously we, knowing that we might have that opportunity to work together again was really attractive to me, because I knew that I would continually learn and continually be challenged. But I think probably what was consistent in our relationship in both organizations is just a level of trust and respect for what we bring to the table, which is pretty rare. Certainly something I try to enlist with all of my team members as well. And it's probably easier said than done. But I think you have to go, at least in this case, you have to go into that relationship, with the goal of establishing that. And once you do, it just makes everything so much easier.
So, because I think you attribute it sort of to a mindset perspective, because I think sometimes people are either intentionally or unintentionally undermining their new boss out of frustration or out of some political motivation. But you took the opposite approach. You sort of said, I'm going to support this person, and that's the mechanism through which my career will advance.
100%, especially if you're working at a growth company, like I was at Axiom and now at Andela, there's going to be opportunity for everyone. If we are growing as a business, that entails going to mean more opportunity for everyone across the organization. So this wasn't a me versus my boss question, or me versus one of my direct reports. If we are all successful, we are all growing this business, it's going to mean more opportunity for all of us. So, that idea or thought never crossed my mind. And I think you have to look at every new boss as an opportunity, obviously, to learn something new. If you're not learning from your boss, and if you're not teaching them things as well across the way, then I think that's probably not the right fit. That's probably not the right relationship. And it might mean that, you may need to move on, or may need to find a new opportunity within the organization, because I see that relationship as one of mutual learning, across your time together. And once that stops, then it just gets really hard.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, I think maybe one of the themes of this episode is this transition. And so I'm really curious, you were at Axiom for 9 years. What was the point at which you, and we're not going to despair, all of the companies that you work for are outstanding companies. This isn't about one company's bad versus one company's good. It's really about your personal growth. But what was the point at which you started to feel, how did you know it was time to leave? I guess, because, 9 years in, there's people, frankly, I have friends at GLG that have been there 16 years. So some people just stay places. How did you know when it was time?
Yeah. And look, it was one of the tougher decisions of my career. I had made so many built so many incredible relationships across the nearly 10 years there, people who have become some of my closest friends in the world. And, I just took so much pride in building that company. I think it was a couple things for me. One, I felt like the team that I would be leaving behind was in a really good place. It was really important to me that when it was time for me to leave, the organization would continue to thrive and hopefully accelerate without me. Not to say that I was the sole reason for that, but I wanted to feel good that I had left my team in a really good place and the organization in a really good place to continue to succeed. And I felt that, probably, quarter way through 2019. That was number one. Number two, as I thought about the things for me to learn at Axiom and the stage of growth that they were in, right? This is, Axiom will do, over $300 million in revenue in 2019. The challenges
Ooh.
that were ahead.
What were they at? What were they at when you
About
started?
50 million.
Oh, maron, mazel.
It was a fun ride, to say the least. But it is a different stage of growth that they are about to embark on, and a different set of challenges that are no doubt exciting and no doubt will be hard. They weren't as interesting to me at this point in my career. Not to say they won't be interesting later, but as I thought about the challenges in leading, the next stage of growth across the size of organization versus going to an earlier stage venture-backed organization that was, doubling in size year over year, as I thought about, okay, the next, call it 5 to 10 years of my career, that was really exciting for me. And obviously the opportunity to enter an organization, as a C-level executive as well was also exciting. So it was, almost less about what was ahead of me at Axiom, more about kind of the other opportunities that were in front of me that were really getting me charged up. I also felt that given, Axiom was headed for an exit, which you alluded to earlier, it was a nice capping off of my career there. It was certainly a North Star for, I think, many of us at the organization for a while. And while it is not the destination, it is certainly just a point in the journey. It was an important one that was, a kind of something that we were aiming for a long time. And to be able to transition out as that was happening, also to me felt like, okay, I can leave now and feel really good about what I've left behind.
Yeah. And so as you're picking your head up, and obviously, you and I were in conversations throughout this process, but for the listeners, as you're picking your head up and thinking about, what you wanted to do, and clearly I think at that point, one of the goals was probably get that chief revenue officer title, but you were also, getting back into the market and talking about your skill set and who you were. Did you face, were there challenges to the fact that you just described both CEB and Axiom as sort of professional services businesses when, kind of B2B SaaS software companies are kind of all the rage? Did you find that you were excluded from those opportunities and Andela just emerged naturally? Or did you have to remarket yourself in some way? How did you balance that tension, if there was one at all?
I wouldn't say I was excluded from those opportunities. However, the question was definitely asked, when I would be talking with SaaS companies around, well, you've never sold SaaS before. Tell us, how would you make that transition? Or, what are the things you haven't done that might be hard for you? Or what do you think the biggest differences are? And look, there are absolutely differences between selling a SaaS product versus selling a professional services product, right? No doubt. My response often would be, look, at the end of the day, however, the challenges that your sales organization will be faced with, from hiring great talent to retaining great talent to developing that great talent to, delivering and solving client problems, right? And so on, that it does not change whether you're selling a piece of software versus selling a service. Okay, when you get into some of the pricing and the structuring of the deal, and certainly on the customer success side, as you talk about managing churn, some of those things will differ. But I don't believe anyway they differ so fundamentally that a SaaS leader can't transition to a professional services organization or vice versa. Now, for me, as I went through the search, and you get different pieces of advice from your mentors and your friends. Some people say, absolutely, you need to go into SaaS, you need to go into tech. Some will say it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, and I think, reflecting upon the two organizations that I was at, for me, what was more important was the fit with the organization, the values of that organization, the growth that was ahead of them, and the product market fit versus it was SaaS versus not SaaS. Because there are plenty of wonderful SaaS companies out there and plenty that are probably struggling. And the same can be said for professional services. And, I think once I landed on, okay, for me, it matters less around SaaS versus non-SaaS, not SaaS. It opened up just a kind of an even greater set of opportunities for me to consider.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think a lot of recruiters and HR people and people that are just in talent acquisition use SaaS experience, quote unquote, as just a as a filter, just to cull the herd in some way to get down to a manageable number, because I don't really, I think running a big sales team, it requires intelligence and,
Yeah.
leadership skills that aren't that different from type of sale to type of sale.
Yeah, I mean, this may sound controversial, but I love recruiting sales execs who have not sold SaaS, because I want people who've had to, create the solution, right? Who've had to create the vision around what they're delivering. That can't point to, a demo or point to, a piece of software that in sometimes can speak for itself. I think the challenge of having to really dig in, understand a client's problem, and paint a vision for how your solution can solve that problem, that's really hard. When you can't say, okay, go to this website or download this piece of software to test it out. In some ways, the challenge is even greater there, and I think requires an even higher, level of sophistication, intellectual horsepower to be successful in that type of environment.
I think that's such a great point. So fair enough. So and I think that the way that you described it is fantastic. And by the way, this is a challenge that many people are facing right now. This transition from, there's a world of recurring revenue businesses out there, and they've been in a different type of sale, and they're trying to figure out how to market themselves. So you were successful in doing that, and now you've got a portfolio of opportunities. You mentioned, product market fit. What are the other elements, and maybe earlier stage venture backed? But when you're thinking about what made you choose Andela, what were the key ingredients?
In this case, I was looking at the leadership of the organization. Obviously, there was a fit and a comfort level with Jess Hunt, again, who I worked with at Axiom and who was the CEO there. But, as I said to her, and I said to our CEO, Jeremy Johnson, while Jess might be the reason I'm sitting here in the office today, it's not the reason why I'm going to come here, because there has to be more than just that for me to stay and to thrive. And so for me, it was meeting, obviously, the broader executive team, really understanding Jeremy's vision for the organization, and more importantly, his values and his investment in people. Talking with him to understand, how he developed his team, how he built this organization, how he cared for and looked after a lot of the employees in the organization. So just understanding who he was as a person and kind of his vision for the organization was really important to really trying to understand what the growth story for the organization has been, and understanding and talking to some of the investors in the company. Andela has raised over $150 million across the last 3 years from some pretty phenomenal and pretty diverse group of VC firms, and talking to some of them to understand why they invested in this business, and why they think this is going to be a really big business and have put their money behind it, right? That speaks volumes. So spending some time to understand, how they chose Andela and why they chose to invest in it was really, really important as well. And then, really digging in a little bit more with our CFO to understand the investments we were making in the business, the investments I would be able to make in the revenue organization to achieve what I think we need to achieve in the coming years, was probably the final piece to know that, the company was ready to invest in building a high-performing sales organization, which is my biggest goal and North Star for the company right now across the next, call it 2 years.
So you just mentioned a number, 150 million. Were you, and we don't have to share the ARR of Andela, but it's probably, if you've raised 150 million, and I think the last round was 100 million, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, the company's raised a lot of money. Were you worried about that as you head in from an equity valuation perspective, that the valuation of the business, the private market valuation of the business, was so high that it would really take, it would take a lot of work? It just sort of created more risk around the value of the equity potentially that was being granted to you, or was it not really a consideration because you just believed in the mission of the company?
I wouldn't say I was worried about it. I think it really comes down to your time horizon and your commitment, right? If you see something as a 2-year opportunity or a 2-year time frame, then yeah, you probably should be worried, because the growth targets that you would have to hit to really recognize that valuation in such a short period of time are probably not realistic. But if your time horizon is a bit longer and your commitment and belief in the organization goes longer than that, as it does for me, then you're less worried, right? Then you're just focused on building a really great company. And there's going to be some bumps in the road along the way. But if you do the things you need to do, you'll get there. And look, I've having been at Axiom for 10 years, where there was a number of fits and starts across that time around, potential additional investments and exits. I've gone into this opportunity and the others that I considered, knowing that, your time horizon, I think, has to be longer than, 1 or 2 years in a high growth venture backed company like that to, I think, really deliver the value that your investors will be looking for. And that was a conversation I had as well with the leadership team, and certainly with some of the investors, was around that time horizon and what they were looking for from a potential exit perspective. You need to ensure that you are all aligned from that perspective. And obviously things can change, but I felt good about that, in those conversations that I had, and have gone into this knowing that this was going to be, this will hopefully be more than a 2-year process.
When you're trying to get an alignment around the time horizon of the investment, and for me, it's always been a little bit of a balancing act, because the reality is that the investors are not philanthropists. They are looking for a return on their invested capital, and you want to do great work, but you're also not a philanthropist. But sometimes having a clarifying conversation about that feels transactional. Were you self-conscious about saying, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to IPO? Or are we trying to exit? Did you feel like you had to dance around that a little bit? How did you approach some of those conversations?
I really wanted to understand, first and foremost, like, what were their reasonings for investing in the organization, right? Like, sure, I mean, as you put it, they're not investing out of just the goodness of their heart. But I wanted to understand, like, how they evaluated the company and what beyond the financial return was important to them. I hesitated to, really push or ask for time horizon questions for an exit, because I just think that is such a fool's errand, because the reality is so much can change year in and year out. I think it's kind of silly to ask for commitments or make promises that are really hard to probably follow up on. I think the reality is, if you build a great company, if you hit the growth targets that we put in front of us, we will have a bunch of different opportunities to consider from an exit perspective. But at the end of the day, if we're not growing the organization, if we're not building a great company and a great sales organization, it doesn't matter if it was a 2-year time horizon or a 4-year or a 5-year time horizon. It will just get pushed out and pushed out. So I didn't, personally, like, again, having seen this through beforehand at Axiom, to me, I kind of throw it all out. Like, no matter what an investor is going to say to me and say, oh, this is a 2-year run or this is a 4-year run, to me, it's more about the fundamentals of the business, why they invested, and what are the growth targets we need to hit over the coming years to build the company we want to hit. That was more important to me than what, somebody from a VC firm is going to tell me they think the company will be worth in 3 years.
Yeah, makes sense. This is always just a big question for lots of people. You're joining a new company in a sales or commercial leadership position, sales or marketing. There's a plan already for 2019. I guess you joined in October or September, so really you can't be responsible for that. So maybe that's a perfect time to join, I guess, because you can be part of the 2020 plan unless it's fully baked. But how do you approach the concept that there may be financial targets that you didn't have an input into, or revenue targets that you then inherit and feel responsibility for? Do you try to renegotiate? How do you think about that?
So, I mean, you're right. For 2019, my impact is pretty minimal, right? Some tweaks here and there, but there's just not much I can impact or really should try and impact or change within the first 30, 60 days. I am very much in listen and learning mode right now. We are in the throes of 2020 planning. And so you're right, from a timing perspective, it's been a good time to hopefully impact what I think we can deliver for 2020. And to be honest, even before I started, the company was great about starting to loop me in on some of that planning, starting to give me, ask for some of my input around, what we think we need to be successful in 2020. And this was, during my kind of transition period outside of Axiom. So, they weren't able to obviously disclose a lot to me as I wasn't yet part of the company, but they were starting to clue me in on certain things that they were thinking about and targets and just getting my input on that. Certainly in my first 30 days here and my next 30 days, it's all about 2020 planning. I'm working hard to get up the curve quickly so I can give some informed thoughts and opinions on what feels realistic from a growth perspective, what feels stretchy, and what are the resources that we need to be successful. Obviously, you'd always wish you have more time, but I feel pretty good about having enough time to say, okay, these are the investments that I need to make. This is what's realistic, and this is what's not. So, I may feel very differently in 6 months' time. So you should check back in with me. But I think joining. Yeah,
I intend to
do it. But I think joining at this point in the year, actually, in some cases, is somewhat ideal because you accept what the current year is going to be, and then you're really just playing for next year.
What is your 30, 60, 90 plan? How do you approach that? So how does one enter an organization? There's a fairly large and installed sales and kind of revenue organization. I know that it's multi-city. I don't know if I don't think you all have a London office yet, but you certainly have
we don't.
You have an Austin office, and do you have field reps in other places?
We have a couple out on the West Coast, but it's majority New York and Austin.
Yeah. But so how do you do that? What's your plan to, all of these people are looking to you. They're probably have their guards up a little bit. What do you do over the first, 3 to 6 months to set the path, set the course?
Yeah. I've kind of broken it up into 3 components, which more or less align with the 30, 60, 90. The first 30 has just been people, right? I'm doing one-on-ones with every single person in the revenue organization, from the AE team to the partner success team or client success team to our RevOps function to spending time down in Austin with our SDR. So really trying to understand everyone, their story, what's working, what's not. If they had a magic wand, what could they change? So just a lot of listening and trying not to jump to too many conclusions. And I'm kind of slowly wrapping up that component of my onboarding. The next 30 days, I think, would be pretty operational. Really understanding the KPIs, how do we measure success, the dashboards and tools that we're using, our tech stack, just the kind of mechanics of the business, so to speak. And then the final kind of 30 days or the final, call it 90 days, will be really client facing. So listening to meeting clients, listening to them, understanding what's working, what's not, potential clients, right, to understand how we're pitching Andela, what's working, what's not, just learning about our solution, in greater depth. And then, really hopefully from there, I can then start to move into a little bit of just, what you might call business as usual and start to do some of the things that I think we need to do. So I'm breaking it up into those 3 chunks. Obviously, there's some of those will run in concurrent with one another, but chopping it up like that at least has made it. And I've communicated that out as well to some of the folks, so they know, like, this is what I'm focused on right now. This is what you can expect from me, or more importantly, not expect from me, because I just haven't gotten to that part of the learning curve yet.
Any big surprises when you think of, the second 30 days you mentioned is KPIs, metrics, dashboards, the cockpit view of how to run the business before you dive into client meetings. Are there any metrics that are surprise, or is it basically, what we talk about all day, every day, pipeline and, conversion rates and win rates and things like that?
No, in fact, I've been pleasantly surprised with, the level of sophistication we have from a metrics and KPIs perspective. In fact, we might have too many, which I think is probably the problem you want to have. For a fairly kind of early stage growth company, we're fairly far along in terms of both the BI tools that we use to track our success and the kind of level of data that we actually look at. What I'm trying to figure out now is, okay, what are the ones we need to really focus on week in, week out, and month in, month out? So the surprise has been, okay, we're further along than we thought. I think actually there might be a little bit of scaling back that has to be done, versus the other problem, which is we need to build this stuff from the ground up.
Yeah. That is a good problem to have. Most of the time it's the opposite. When we talked about this offline, you said it was okay to ask about it. One of the things that happened right as you joined was that in some ways Andela pivoted some of the core value proposition. I guess, would you characterize it that way? And, what has that been like, which is the reality that, you parted ways with, I think, 400 junior engineers. How has that been as a new executive into the business?
Yeah. I mean, look, it was hard. I think it was hard for everyone. This is a company that cares deeply about its people, especially the wonderful engineers we have on the continent in Africa. And, this was a decision very much driven by changes in demand that we're seeing here in the US. And frankly, I think, an acceptance and admittance from us that we were probably a little bit late to the game in recognizing that change in demand. So, we had to make the tough decision to, unfortunately, part ways with, a pretty large number of our engineers who were not working for Andela clients, and shift kind of our focus in terms of an organization that primarily developed its own talent, to an organization that will go out and hire more experienced talent that's out there in the world today. We will still continue to develop some of our own talent. It'll be focused in one country, in Rwanda, but we will shift more to an organization that acquires more experienced talent, because that's what clients are asking from us. And I think we're going through that transition as a company from one early on where you're very focused on yourself, right? You're building your brand, you're building your value proposition. It's all about you, to the company we need to be, which is one that's a little bit more focused on our clients and what they need and what they're asking us for. And right now, what they're saying is we need more senior, sophisticated engineers who can come in, hit the ground running, and do some pretty complex and challenging software development work. We needed to pivot our recruiting strategy and hiring strategy in Africa, and eventually we'll extend beyond Africa as well, to keep up with that demand. So it was a very hard decision. It was one that the exec team kind of told me about before I started, so I wasn't blindsided by it. And it certainly consumed a lot of our time across September. We're kind of through it now, and it was handled, I think, as thoughtful and as can be. And, we're excited to start moving forward again.
Cool. Well, thanks for addressing it. One last topic before we wrap up, which is, I alluded to your family earlier, and you've got 3 boys in New York City, in Brooklyn. We won't give out your street address, but
thank you for that. Appreciate it.
No problem. You've got 3 rapscallions, 3 crazy kids. How do you handle the work-life balance of, you're being an executive, you're a CRO, there's a high expectation around performance and impact, at the same time that you want to be present and available for your children. And also your children are themselves, they're
crazy.
They're crazy. They require some attention and some oversight.
Yeah, a fair bit. They're very poorly behaved.
I have unsuccessfully tried to purchase one of them, but you have not. You've not sold.
Well, we're still in negotiation.
So, how do you do it? What's your secret?
I don't think I have a secret. I think first and foremost, I think you need to make that same level of commitment at work at home. And my wife often talks about setting up guardrails and ensuring that you are present at home when you need to be, right? And some of that are, small things like when I get home, taking the phone and putting it away for a couple of hours so I can be present for them to do their homework with them. Or, I have one boy age 10, one aged 8, and one age 3, right? So very, very different requirements. So it's doing homework with the 10-year-old, and then it's like, playing toys with the 3-year-old. So some of it is just putting up those guardrails so that you can be present for them and be involved with them, right? ensuring that you do make that time to be at their school when you need to in the morning, in the afternoons, or if it's on the ball field and on the weekend. I talk about it, I think, pretty openly with my team as well. Like, it's really important to me that they see me not only as, a leader who's really committed to them and their careers, but someone who's also committed to my family. And I want to give them that same level of freedom and independence and space to do the same. I think you are a better leader and employee at work if you have a full life, right? If you have life outside of work that's really fulfilling and really, really engaging. If you are just all about work all the time, I think that gets old really quickly, not just for you, but probably for your colleagues. So ensuring that you have that opportunity to be engaged outside of work, I think, is really important. And it's certainly been important for me. And I talk about work with them, especially my 10 and 8-year-old. They ask me all the time, what do you do? What does this mean? What does it mean to be in sales? Try explaining that to an 8-year-old.
What do you say?
I talk about how we solve client problems. I talk about how we provide a service to them and they pay us money for that service, and that money allows us to employ people so they can put food on the table for their families. So I try to relate it to kind of, in terms that they can understand and how it impacts them or people like them, with other employees and their families, and they get it. And I bring them into the office. I used to bring them into the Axiom office all the time. I'm sure my colleagues are probably thankful that they're gone and no longer destroying the place. But I want them to see it, and I want people to see what my family is like, and I want to meet and know theirs as well. So it's something I really pride myself on, is the ability to be really present at work when I am there and to deliver for my team, and be really present at home and to deliver for my family as well.
When you do you feel obligated? You mentioned you put the phone away when you get home. Do you pick up the laptop again after the kids are in bed and do another hour of work?
I do. I do. I try not to do it every night, and I'm certainly doing it more right now than maybe when I was kind of in business as usual mode at Axiom, but that's unfortunately just what has to be done right now. So I come home, I put the phone away, I'm with them, like I said, homework, food, dinner, bath, that whole thing. When they go to bed between 8 and 9, open the laptop and try to get some work done. You can't do that every night. Again, I think you are more productive when you have that balance. But right now, that's what it takes. And I tell my team that, like, hey, you might not hear from me from these hours, and then if you need something, I'll be back online. I also tell them, you don't need to respond to me after these hours. I'm also a big Sunday evening worker to just prepare for the week. I find that I'm less stressed coming in on Monday if I can get a lot of work done on Sunday nights. And I tell them, don't feel the need to respond. This is for me. This is how I work. That doesn't mean my expectation is that you have to work this way as well.
That's cool. That's nice of you.
Thanks.
What time do you go to bed?
Too late, probably 11.
And what time do you wake up?
6.
Okay, 7. Yeah. We're getting close to 8 hours.
Yeah,
it's not quite 8 hours.
Not quite 8 hours, but
It is what it is. Bryan, thank you so much for being on the show. The last little bit here, we want to pay it forward. And so we want to ask you, who are your influences? Who are the people that you look up to? Who are the people that you think we should know about? Who's had a big impact on your life, either personally or professionally?
Well, we've obviously alluded to my current boss, who, has been a wonderful mentor as well and sponsor to me, Jess Hunt. I learned the art of sales, however, from two people one who I mentioned earlier at CEB. One is Will McKinnon, who ran sales at CEB, and then Axiom. He's now an exec recruiter. And then his successor, a gentleman by the name of Mike Archer, who ran CEB during kind of the height of their growth and ran sales there. And he is someone who I still consider, a mentor today, and have sought advice from him for many years. So those two individuals, certainly had a profound impact and really taught me what it means to be a sales leader, and more importantly, taught me that this is a profession, and a profession we should be proud of. And, I have kind of picked up the torch from them in terms of, in the organizations I've been in hopefully elevating the view and hopefully the respect that the sales organization gets inside. And I learned it from both of them.
Awesome. Bryan, if folks are listening to this and they want to help Andela achieve its mission, they want to work for you, maybe they want you to be a mentor, they want to reach out and ask you a question, is that okay with you? And if so, what's your preferred method of communication?
I would love that. I'd be honored to. We are hiring a ton right now at Andela. They can obviously find me on LinkedIn. You can email me directly, Bryan.Caplin. It's Bryan.Caplin. I'm trying to make it as difficult as possible. Bryan.Caplin@Andela.com.
Awesome. Bryan, thanks so much for being on the show. I'll talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye. Hey, everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. This is Sam's Corner. Thanks for listening. What a great interview with Bryan Caplin. He's a good friend, but also is just a thoughtful commercial leader. And a couple points that I just want to reiterate with everybody. The first is, if you're going to think about leaving jobs, you got to do your due diligence. And Bryan did a tremendous amount of due diligence when he decided to leave Axiom and join Andela. Andela wasn't the only company that he spoke to. He spoke with a wide number of companies. He didn't feel like there was a huge barrier from moving from services sales to SaaS sales, but he made sure that he had a talk track and he explained why it wasn't a barrier. And I think that's important for everybody. I personally don't believe that SaaS sales are so elusive and mysterious and strange, and that anybody that's done a different type of sale has no way of understanding what a SaaS sale looks like. Often it's just a euphemism for understanding of modern sales techniques and sales strategies. And if you've been at a modern high growth company, you probably know those things or have been exposed to them. But at any rate, the big point is do your due diligence. That means talking to current employees, former employees. The founder means at the right time talking to investors, and it means really understanding the growth plan and growth model of the business. So that's sort of one thing to think about. Second thing that we talked about is, Bryan inherited a new boss when he was at Axiom, a woman named Jess Hunt, who's been on the show and who is the current COO of Andela, and she recruited him to Andela. So clearly, they established a good relationship, but at the point that she joined, he had been what they call layered, right? She had come in over top of him. So how do you deal with that? And he made just a really, really important and good point. He said, when the company grows, you grow. Right? And your responsibility, as long as the company is growing, don't worry about who's over top of you and whether you get to continue to report to the CEO or the CRO, and now you have to report to the VP of sales or somebody else. The point is growth happening? Because if growth is happening, you are going to have responsibility, and new jobs and new opportunities will emerge. So if you can just get in that mindset of committing yourself to helping the company grow and execute its strategy, new opportunities will reveal themselves to you, even if you have a new boss and you're upset potentially that there's a layer between you and who your former boss was. But don't worry about that as much as worrying about, can you help the company grow? And if you can do that, I think you're going to be in a great position. Finally, he walked through his 30, 60, 90-day plan. I personally think that 30, 60, 90 is maybe too short in terms of how long it takes an executive to really understand and onboard. And the implication of a 30, 60, 90 is at the end of 90, you're supposed to start making big impact. And I think it takes a little bit longer than that, but Bryan broke it up into really logical segments. The first 30 days, listening to the team, meeting the team, understanding what the team wants, how they think about the business. The next 60 days or the next 30 days, the first 60 days, operationalizing the business, understanding what are the KPIs, what are the metrics, what are the dashboards, what are the things that we're going to be reviewing and monitoring on an ongoing basis. And then the last 30 days, spend time with clients. And this is an area where a lot of executives make a big mistake, which is that they do not spend enough time with clients in their first 3 months. They spend all of their time inward looking and not enough time outwards looking. You need to be looking outwards such that you can have the right global perspective. They didn't bring you into the company so that you can help them and help everybody stare at your belly button. The point is that you need to bring an outside perspective, and you need to bring a fresh perspective from your conversations directly with the clients. Do not rely on third parties to channel the information back to clients. And you need to meet with them alone, so in some instances, so that the account manager, the salesperson, whomever, isn't buffering the information. You need to develop your own perspective as a new person at a company, particularly a new executive. So those are some of the thoughts from Sam's Corner. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Before we go, we want to thank our sponsors. We have two on the show. Vidyard. Email isn't dead, but it sure is boring. Add video to your emails to stand out in the inbox for free with Vidyard. Get Vidyard for free by visiting vidyard.com/saleshacker. And then our second sponsor is Outreach, the leading sales engagement platform. Go to outreach.io/saleshacker for more information. All right. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.